Have you ever been told you mattered less, just because you were born a daughter? I never thought those words would come from my own parents, the people who raised me, the people who once tucked me into bed in a little house filled with love and memories. But that's exactly what happened the day they sold my childhood home to fund my brother's lavish wedding. I remember standing there in the driveway, suitcase in hand, staring at the sold sign planted in the front yard like a gravestone. The shutters were still the same faded green. The front porch still sagged in the middle where my dad used to rock in his chair, and the garden still smelled faintly of the lilacs my mom planted when I was 7. Every corner of that house held a memory. My first steps in the hallway, birthday candles blown out in the dining room, nights I cried into my pillow after teenage heartbreak. And now it wasn't mine anymore, not ours. It was theirs, taken and handed over for one reason only: my brother's happiness. The golden son. Growing up, I thought we were just a normal family. I shared bunk beds with my sister until she left for college. I learned how to ride my bike in that cracked driveway. I even carved my initials into the old oak tree out back. That house was the backdrop of my life, the one place I thought would never betray me. But looking back, the signs were always there. My brother, let's call him Michael, was treated like royalty from the moment he could walk. If I brought home an A, my parents said, "Good, that's expected." If he brought home a B, they cheered like he'd won a trophy. At Christmas, I got a sweater while he got a brand new bike. At dinner, he got the biggest steak while I scraped up potatoes. It became a running joke in the family. Michael the golden boy, the heir, the one who could do no wrong. But jokes cut deep when you're living them. I used to think maybe I was just being sensitive. Maybe that's just how families worked. But then I heard it straight from their mouths. I was 14, helping Mom fold laundry in the living room, when she sighed and said to Dad, "Well, at least we have Michael to carry the family name. The girls will just get married off anyway." I froze, a pair of socks in my hands, my heart sinking. Just get married off. Like I was cattle, like my only worth was what man would claim me. And they didn't even realize I was listening. That sentence never left me. Fast forward to now, standing in front of the house with that cruel sold sign, I finally understood it wasn't just a passing comment. It was the truth they lived by. When Michael announced his engagement, the house turned into a bargaining chip. My parents wanted his wedding to be perfect, grand, extravagant, the kind of event people in town would talk about for years. Never mind the cost. Never mind that they didn't have enough savings. Never mind that the only way to fund it was to sell the one thing that held our family together, our home. When I found out, I confronted them. Why my house? Why sell the place we all grew up in? My mom didn't even hesitate. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Because you're just a daughter. He's the one who'll carry the family forward." Her words hit harder than any slap. Just a daughter. Like every memory I had in those walls meant nothing. Like every part of me that loved that house was invisible. I wanted to scream, wanted to make them see me, but all I could do was choke back tears. Michael didn't even flinch. He just smiled, arm wrapped around his fiancée, and said, "It's not a big deal, sis. You'll understand when you get married. Understand?" How could I understand watching my home, the only place that ever felt like mine, sold to fund a wedding so over the top it made me sick? How could I understand being erased, dismissed, traded away because of the family I was born into and the gender I couldn't change? I left that day with my heart in pieces, carrying nothing but a suitcase and the bitter truth. But here's the thing, losing that house wasn't the worst part. What hurt most wasn't the bricks, the rooms, or even the memories. It was the reason they gave me, the sentence that would haunt me forever. "Because you're just a daughter." And I didn't know it yet. But those words would echo louder than ever on the day of my brother's wedding. Growing up with Michael was like living in a never-ending play where he was the star and the rest of us were just extras. You ever feel invisible in your own family? That was me. I can still remember sitting at the dinner table, watching Dad carve the roast chicken. Without fail, the biggest, juiciest piece of meat went straight onto Michael's plate. Mom would smile at him, say, "Eat up, sweetheart, you need your strength." I'd glance at my plate, half filled with potatoes and vegetables, and swallow the lump in my throat. It wasn't just food. It was everything. Birthdays? Michael got bikes, video game consoles, shiny gifts wrapped in gold paper. I got books from the clearance bin, sweaters 2 sizes too big. When I asked why, Mom would say, "Sweetheart, you're practical, you don't need all that." Translation: Michael was worth spending on. I wasn't. Even school couldn't escape the golden boy treatment. When I brought home straight A's, my parents barely looked up from their coffee. "Good, that's expected," Dad muttered. But when Michael scraped by with B's, they clapped, hugged him, and said, "We're so proud of you." Proud. The word I craved and never got. It's funny how words stick. I carried that hunger for approval, like a stone in my chest, thinking maybe if I worked harder, smiled brighter, they'd finally see me. But no matter what I did, I was always just the daughter. And then came his engagement. "Oh, you should have seen the way my parents lit up," Mom cried, clutching his fiancé's hands like she'd won the lottery. Dad called it the proudest day of his life. They popped champagne, toasted to Michael's future, made speeches about how he would carry the family name into the next generation. Meanwhile, I stood in the corner, holding a glass of sparkling cider because no one even remembered I was old enough to drink. They didn't toast to me, not once in my life. And then, in one meeting at the dinner table, the decision was made. "We'll sell the house," Dad announced, casual as if he was deciding what to have for breakfast. My fork clattered against my plate. "Wait, what?" I asked, voice trembling. "You can't. That's our home." Mom didn't flinch. She set down her glass and said, "It's just a house, honey. What matters is Michael's future. Just a house." My throat tightened. "But it's our memories. It's all we have left of Grandma and Grandpa. Why does his wedding mean more than that?" And then came the dagger, sharp and merciless. Mom looked me dead in the eye and said, "Because you're just a daughter. Michael will carry on the family name. You'll get married and join someone else's. Just a daughter." The words rang in my head like a bell, over and over, each echo cutting deeper. Michael smirked, hand on his fiancé's knee. "It's not a big deal, sis. You'll understand when it's your turn." My turn? My turn to what? Be erased? To be told my worth depended on some husband I hadn't even met yet? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break every glass on that table. Instead, I just sat there, staring at my half-empty plate, heat rising to my cheeks. My hands shook under the table, gripping my napkin so tight it tore. That night, I went to the house alone. I walked through every room, tracing my fingers along the walls, memorizing every crack, every scratch, every creak in the floorboards. The smell of old wood and lavender still lingered, the faint sound of laughter echoing in my mind from birthdays and Christmas mornings long gone. And I whispered to myself, they don't get it. They'll never get it. But what I didn't know then was that the cost of Michael's perfect wedding wasn't just a house. It was about to tear open every crack in our family until the whole thing crumbled in front of everyone. The day of Michael's wedding felt less like a celebration and more like a spectacle. From the moment I pulled up to the venue, an over-the-top country club draped in white roses and crystal chandeliers, it was clear no expense had been spared. I stood there in my modest navy dress, clutching my purse like a lifeline, watching valets park BMWs and Mercedes that probably cost more than my entire yearly salary. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of luxury: champagne towers, imported orchids, gold-rimmed plates. And all I could think was, this is what my childhood home bought. Every rose petal scattered on the aisle, every sparkling light dangling from the ceiling, every overpriced appetizer. It all came from the walls I grew up in, the porch where I learned to ride a bike, the living room where I sang along to Christmas carols with my sister. All of it gone, traded in for one night of extravagance. My parents were glowing, practically floating around the room, greeting guests, bragging about their son's big day. When they spotted me, my mom gave me a tight smile and whispered through gritted teeth, "Don't embarrass us tonight. Just be polite." My throat went dry. Embarrass them? As if I hadn't already sacrificed everything for this night. I nodded, biting my tongue until I tasted blood. I slipped into a chair at the edge of the room, trying to disappear among the sea of sequined gowns and tuxedos. People stared, some out of curiosity, some out of pity. I could hear the whispers, "That's his sister. The one who lost the house. She didn't even dress up. Guess she couldn't keep up with the rest of them." My palms sweated. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to sit tall. I wasn't going to cry. Not here, not in front of them. When the ceremony began, I watched Michael at the altar, grinning like he'd won the world. His fiancée looked radiant in a gown dripping with diamonds, her veil flowing like a river of silk. Guests oohed and awed, phones lifted to capture every moment. And me? I sat there silent, invisible, trying not to choke on the bitterness rising in my throat. My parents beamed like royalty presenting their heir to the world. They whispered proudly to anyone who would listen, "We sold the house to give him this day. Nothing is too much for our son." And every time I heard it, another piece of me broke. During the reception, things only got worse. The speeches began. Long, flowery praises about Michael's brilliance, his future, his role as the pillar of the family. Not once did anyone mention the sacrifices made. Not once did anyone acknowledge what was lost. I sipped my champagne slowly, staring into the bubbles, fighting back the tears pressing against my eyes. Then came the final toast. My father stood, glass raised high, voice booming. "Tonight we honor not just Michael and his bride, but the future of our family. He is the one who carries our name, our legacy. We gave him everything we could because he deserves it." The guests erupted in applause. I froze. Deserves it. The words echoed in my head, louder than the clapping. My father's eyes swept the room, landed on me for a fraction of a second, then slid away like I didn't even exist. Heat crawled up my neck, shame burning hotter than fire, and then, as the clapping died down, I heard it, clear as a bell, cruel as ever. My mother's voice, sharp and certain. "That's why we sold the house. A daughter can't carry a family name." A ripple of laughter followed from nearby relatives, like her words were some kind of punchline. My chest constricted, my vision blurred. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout, to tell every single person in that room what it felt like to lose everything because of a title I never asked for. Just a daughter. But instead, I sat frozen, nails digging into the stem of my glass, heart pounding so loud I thought the whole room could hear it. And then, just as I thought I might explode, the doors at the back of the hall swung open. A voice rang out over the crowd, firm, commanding, unexpected. And in that instant, I knew their perfect night was about to unravel. The room turned as the doors slammed open, and for a moment the music stopped mid-note. A man in a dark suit walked in, briefcase in hand, his steps heavy against the marble floor. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who was he? Why was he here? Why did he look so serious? My stomach flipped as I recognized him. It was Mr. Harris, our family's longtime lawyer, the one who had handled my grandparents' estate years ago. He didn't even glance at the guests. His eyes went straight to my parents, then to Michael, standing at the head table with a champagne glass in hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice steady but firm, "but this cannot wait." The room hushed instantly, forks frozen mid-air, conversations dying. My father frowned, irritation flashing across his face. "Harris, what is the meaning of this? We're in the middle of a wedding." Mr. Harris placed his briefcase on a table, snapped it open, and pulled out a thick folder. "That's exactly why I'm here. There's been a mistake, one that affects everything tonight." My mother's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard. Harris didn't flinch. He flipped through the papers and held one up. "The property you sold, the house, was never yours to sell outright. It's still partially tied to your parents' trust. Legally, it can't be transferred without the consent of all heirs." Gasps echoed through the hall. Guests leaned closer, whispering furiously. I sat frozen, the words sinking in slowly. All heirs. That meant me. My chest tightened as Harris continued, his voice rising with each word. "Which means this wedding, this extravagant display you funded with that money, was paid for illegally. And if the trust challenges it, you'll be held accountable." My brother's face went pale, his fiancée clutching his arm, eyes wide in horror. My father's jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might break. "That can't be true," he snapped. Harris nodded calmly. "It is. And if you don't believe me, here are the documents signed by your parents when the trust was established. Every child, son or daughter, has equal claim." Suddenly, every eye in the room turned to me. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. Equal claim. For the first time in my life, the law, the cold, hard truth, was on my side. My mother shook her head violently, her voice trembling. No, that house was for Michael. He's the one who matters. Her finger jabbed toward me like a knife. "She's just a daughter." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. My cheeks burned, but I didn't look away. For the first time, I met her glare head on, my voice shaking but strong. "Not just a daughter, an heir. And you knew it," gasps erupted. A few guests actually clapped, their murmurs growing louder, spilling across the room like a wave. My mother's face crumpled. My father's shoulders sagged. Michael's fiancée looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. And me? For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. But as Harris gathered his papers, his words landed like a hammer. "This isn't over. The trust will be reviewing the sale. And depending on the outcome, there could be consequences." The music didn't start again. The laughter didn't return. The glow of Michael's perfect night dimmed into awkward silence, guests avoiding eye contact, the taste of scandal thick in the air. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if my parents thought losing their house was bad, they hadn't seen what was coming next. The silence after Mr. Harris's words felt heavier than the chandelier above our heads. You could feel it pressing down on everyone, like the entire room had been pulled into the truth and no one knew how to breathe anymore. My father's face had gone stiff, his eyes darting between Harris and me like he was searching for some escape route that didn't exist. My mother looked like the ground had been ripped out from under her, her hand trembling so hard she nearly dropped her glass. Michael, the golden sun, stood frozen, his perfect smile finally cracked. His bride tugged at his sleeve, whispering something frantic, her eyes darting to the guests who were now whispering too loudly to hide it. The words passed through the air like daggers. Illegal. Trust. She's an heir. They knew? I sat still, my hands gripping the tablecloth, but inside I was on fire. For years I'd been the shadow, the extra, the one who never measured up because I wasn't the sun. But now, in front of everyone, the truth had flipped the script. I wasn't the disposable daughter anymore. I was the heir they had tried to erase, and the world knew it. My father finally spoke, his voice low but desperate. "We'll fix this. We'll make it right." But Harris shook his head. "It's not that simple. The trust will investigate, and if challenged, the sale is void, which means the funds for this wedding will be clawed back." "Every penny!" gasps rippled across the hall. The bride's parents, who had been sitting stiff and proud, suddenly looked horrified, whispering furiously to each other. The bride herself pulled away from Michael, her face pale. "You mean, this wedding was paid with money that wasn't even theirs?" Harris nodded once, firm. My brother stammered, "It's not my fault. I didn't know." But his fiancée's expression told me everything. She didn't care whose fault it was. She only cared that her perfect fairy tale had just turned into a scandal. My mother finally broke, her voice cracking as she shouted across the room at me. "Are you happy now? You've ruined your brother's wedding. You've humiliated us in front of everyone." The words hit me, but they didn't pierce the way they used to. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor, and for the first time in my life, I let my voice carry, not just to her, but to the whole room. "No. You ruined this when you sold the only home I ever knew, just because I was a daughter. You ruined this when you decided my memories were worth less than his one perfect night. Don't you dare put this on me." The room erupted, not in laughter, not in whispers, but in applause. Actual applause. Some guests clapped softly, others loudly, some even stood. My mother's face twisted with rage. My father slumped into his chair. Michael's fiancée ripped off her veil and stormed out with her parents right behind her. The golden boy chased after her, shouting her name, but the sound of his footsteps only made the scene sadder. For once he wasn't shining. He was crumbling. I stood there, trembling but strong, feeling decades of silence and invisibility finally peel away. For the first time, I wasn't just the daughter. I was the one who stood up when they tried to erase me. The night ended in chaos. Guests left in hushed groups, casting sympathetic glances at me, shaking their heads at my parents. The music never came back. The champagne went warm. The perfect wedding collapsed under the weight of its own lies. Days later, the fallout began. The trust confirmed what Harris had said. The sale was invalid. The money had to be returned. My parents, drowning in shame and debt, had to face lawsuits and embarrassment from every direction. Michael's engagement fell apart. His fiancée leaving him with nothing but a pile of unpaid bills and broken pride. And me? I walked away. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate. I simply walked away knowing that the house may have been taken from me, but my worth never was. Months later, I drove past that house. The shutters were still green, the porch still sagged, but it belonged to someone else now. I parked across the street, let the memories wash over me, and whispered to myself, they couldn't erase me. Not then, not now. And here's the afterhook, the part I'll never forget. Every time my parents pass that house, and I know they do, they remember the night they lost more than bricks and wood. They lost their son's wedding, their reputation, their pride, and all because they thought a daughter didn't matter. But I did. I always did.